Welcome, everyone, to another edition of 45 Forward, where our mission is to help you, our listeners, from Los Angeles to Long Island, make your second half of life even better than the first. When experts talk about financial planning for retirement, many of them assume that people are following a standard life script: go to college, get married, buy a house, have kids, and a career until traditional retirement. But a growing number of adults do not have children, and in fact are choosing to be child free. According to one recent survey, 47% of U.S. adults younger than 50 say they are unlikely to ever have kids. In today's episode, I talk with Bri Conn, the Chief Experience Officer of Childfree Wealth, a firm that specializes in financial planning for adults who are child free by choice. Bri will talk about what it means to be child free and the ways in which child free financial planning may look vastly different from traditional planning. She'll explain the concept of FILE, which stands for Financial Independence, Live Early. There are still common concerns, of course, like who will take care of me when I'm older. But through such planning, child free people can choose and design a life around their own wants and needs. So now let's meet our guest, Bri Conn. Bri, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today, Ron. I'm very excited to be here.
Excited to have you. This is an important topic because, people just assume, and a lot of, planners, even, like community planners, they plan housing and they always like plan on, oh, what's the optimal, oh, family of four. Not necessarily, and
Yeah.
that's what diversity means today. So, now we'll get into all that, but let me first, and of course today, it's not unusual for women to be involved in financial planning fields, but this has been changing over the years, and your approach is not is just a little unusual, So you didn't decide, oh, I'm going to major in finance in college and go into banking and so forth. So tell us a little bit about how you did end up with your firm.
Yeah, so I ended up here kind of on an accident. I started out, I went to college, I got a communication degree and worked in marketing at the time. Really had no idea I was going to end up in finance. And I worked in marketing for about 5 years. I was really interested in personal finance and knew that I wanted to potentially pursue it one day. And that was after being in marketing for such a long time. I was getting really, really good at learning how to make people spend money, but I am not a natural spender. I'm a natural saver. And so I realized, hey, this isn't quite matching the person that I am. I'm learning a ton about finance. I'm really trying to figure it out for myself. Let's go and get a little bit more involved in finance. I had the, fantastic opportunity. I was provided an education by my parents, all of those things. So I had a jump start in life and was able to take that risk of saying, I'm actually going to switch careers and switch what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And went ahead. I met Dr. J, the founder of Childfree Wealth, and ended up asking him for a job after we talked for a couple different times. There wasn't a job available when
Uh-huh.
I was doing this, it was just him. And I really fell in love with child-free financial planning and life planning because it brought a lot of the different things together that I felt were super important. And that is life planning. So many times we can go ahead and have a conversation about finances, but we're missing out on the life part. And that was one of the big things that attracted me to child-free wealth and eventually ending up where I am now here.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, and in general, financial planning, personal finance is, I think, critically important. And one of the criticisms of traditional education these days, liberal arts education, is that you come out and people, younger people, and then as it goes on, they become older and they still don't have a sense of personal finance. And that's puts, you can learn all you want about economic theory, but if you can't control your budget, if you don't know how to plan your finances to meet your life, that's a problem. So I think that that's something that's people are waking up to and realizing that there are certain life skills you need, and so now, so tell us, just give us a little bit more background about just the demographics of this field. I mentioned a little bit in the introduction,
Mhm.
but I don't think people realize, it's first of all about, how many people don't have children and why don't they have children, and what is the difference between just being without children and child free.
Yeah, so one of the big like terminology things we often talk about is child free means you don't have kids, you're not planning on having kids, and that's often by choice. And then there's childless, which means you don't have kids, you're not planning on having kids, but that's often because of some sort of circumstance where that's how you ended up. Not necessarily because that's how you wanted to end up. In the end, there are some people who, wanted to have children and would refer to themselves as childless, and then after a grieving point said, you know what, I don't feel that term matches me anymore, that I'm just going to instead say that I'm child free.
Hmm.
We often joke about it is, you know, it's called child free wealth because there had to be a name
Hmm.
and it couldn't be didn't have kids, not planning on having kids wealth because that's a really long name and a lot to say.
Right.
So, so it, it doesn't matter what your background is and why you don't have kids. We don't ask about that. Some people will tell us, but oftentimes I don't know why our clients don't have children, and it's not honestly not my business to ask. And so, however you end up there, that's not what's important. What's important is that when you end up there and when it's kind of come to that realization of you're not going to be having children, that
Hmm.
you get a life and financial plan that matches you and really fits who you are and what you see throughout things. The studies are just coming out, so it's really hard to get a firm grasp that 47% is the best we have so far,
Hmm.
but it's something that hasn't really been researched a ton. So I'm sure over the next few years, we'll continue to see more and more of that come out and more numbers. But right now, it's just such a new thing for so many people to dive into.
Yeah. I think, and you and I have talked about this in some of our previous conversations, but I think it's also something that people don't want to bring up and don't want to acknowledge. And I think that you and I have talked about almost, a subtle stigma to oh, you don't have kids. Um, and so I'm sure that's something that you run into. And how do you handle people's opinions about having children, not having children?
Yeah, I guess personally, I just make jokes about it if somebody comes at me. Um, so that's how I tend to handle things. And whether that's right or wrong, I think it's different for everybody. Um, it's you know, I don't get a vote in your life, you don't get a vote in my life. That's kind of
Hmm.
the main thing is do what makes you happy. It's okay, whatever you choose. We have free will for a reason. And as long as you're being kind to others and respectful, then does it really matter much more what people are doing and whether or not they're having kids?
Hmm.
That's how I tend to look at things. But yeah, if when I do get comments about it face to face or even, over the internet, I just make jokes about it. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I still think, yeah, I like your point to just be kind about it. People have different choices. And I have heard people say, well, I don't want to bring a child into this world. Okay. I understand the world. I did want to do that, but live and let live and live your way. So, um, but it's still it's difficult, and it's important to recognize that it takes a different kind of approach. So talk about that a little bit now. Let's get into your approach. What I mentioned that you know that it could be vastly different. So talk about some of the differences between traditional planning and child-free planning.
Yeah, so the first thing that we do whenever we see a client is we start with the end in mind. And what that really means is we ask the question, do you care about how much money you pass on when you die?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big question. Many people, many of our clients will say, no, I don't care. Just think about that for a second. Think about the traditional financial planning. What is often the goal? Generational wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not so for our clients. So if we're not working to build generational wealth, that throws off the entire traditional financial plan because you're no longer working to build up that giant nest egg to pass on to somebody else. It means you can work less. You can work, whether it be, a prolonged period of time, but you're working less, you're making less. Maybe you just say I'm going to retire sooner and cut out from work completely. Interestingly enough, we don't actually see that happen a ton with our clients. Many times they just cut back on work quite often.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the start of it is think about when you're going in and you're doing financial projections and you're figuring out how much money one needs to retire, well, if the goal is to really just pass on whatever's left over, but you don't want to be leaving $1 million behind, then you can work a heck of a lot less throughout life and make different
Hmm.
choices, whatever that is, to get you to your goal. So that's really the starting point.
Hmm. Hmm. And are people some people I've talked to over the years have talked about just changing because of longevity, just changing the model to a retirement to, taking mini retirements along the way, sort of. Do you find that that's in your experience people are trying that, or I guess it's just taking breaks or different turns in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing that those mini retirements, that's something we see all the time with people.
Hmm.
And it's not uncommon for me to see it on any sort of intake form that we do. Um, it's so common, in fact, that when I see somebody who says, "No, that's not my goal. I want to keep working. I want to leave a bunch of money behind," that I kind of get thrown off for a second because I just don't live in that world every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we do mostly. So the mini retirements, they're great, they're fantastic. And I think a lot of our clients have those options to take that because whether it's their own job and career they're changing, or if they're in a couple and they're dual income, then many times they can live off of one income and make
Right.
shifts there too. So it just definitely varies. But yes, the mini retirement is such a common thing for
Mm-hmm.
our clients, and it is so fun to plan those.
Oh, nice. How long are they generally? Are they a year or two, or the what? How long?
It depends, we say let's not do anything less than 6 months because you just need some time to decompress.
Mm-hmm.
We often talk about the sabbatical. It's, hey, for the first 2 months, you just sit on the couch and watch Netflix
Mm-hmm.
and just not think about anything. The
Mm-hmm.
next 2 months you start dabbling, and maybe the last 2 months then you're going out and figuring out, okay, this is what I'm gonna do next. So
Mm-hmm.
that's if you're doing that 6 months approach. There are people who have taken longer mini retirements, whether that be a year, a couple years. It really depends. When you're getting to those longer retirements, it really depends on your financial flexibility and what kind of situation you're in. So they can be longer, prolonged period of time. But most often, we're not seeing them last any longer than 2, maybe 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of short breaks because often people will say, I just want something to do. I want to go enjoy things. I was reading something this weekend and there were a bunch of people on there and they said, yeah, I don't have to work anymore, but I need something. I need something to keep me stimulated
Mm-hmm.
and keep my mind moving. And so I'm going to go ahead and find a career that I enjoy. It might not pay the most, but I don't need the money anyway. So I
Mm-hmm.
can just do it and have fun doing it. And we do see that quite often.
Mm. Yeah, I think that obviously there are issues if you're in a company and you sort of like the company and you say, well, I'm going to take a break for a while. And it does put you on a different career track, and people do kind of like look at you like, are you serious? And the thing is, yeah, I'm serious, but I have a different kind of approach. It may throw you, to the back of the line in terms of career advancement in some companies, but I think people are just saying, fine, whatever, I mean, you know, life goes quickly, and why push off what I want to do until the very end when you never know what will happen? So let's do some of the things I want to do now. And I think one of the things that has helped, and certainly it helped me in my personal life with, I didn't do a mini retirement, but I just stopped working in my company in my 50s. I could have kept going, but I want to do something different. And so the flexibility of having two income families, that definitely helped. So,
Mhm.
my having the support of my wife was critical, saying, honey, do it. And that's not always the case. So I did appreciate that. It was really helpful. And I think that the dual income families, I think that is one of the advantages we have, is that there's a little bit more flexibility and willingness to take risks because you can do that. Um, so let's keep talking about that in terms of what other kinds of differences are there besides, okay, you're not looking to leave a legacy, a financial legacy anyway.
Yeah, well, I want to expand on that dual income we
Sure.
talked about there too. Another benefit of that, oftentimes we'll see with couples, is when that's brought up and when those conversations happen, is in couples, many times, usually one of the people in the couple, in your case, your wife, is there to support you and say, yes, do that jump, take that leap, because she knows what's going on and she's privy to your financial information, all of those things. Whereas many times when we have these conversations with soloists, I just met with somebody the other day and they're getting close to, I mean, the typical retirement age.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I'm asking my parents about this still. And they're, their parents are saying, nope, you need to keep working, you need to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at them and I said, no, no, you don't. Like, you can retire today completely and never work again. In this case, they just wanted to take a mini retirement because they love what they're doing. But like, you absolutely do not need any more money. So if you want to retire completely, you can. And I think that's one of the big traps that happens with soloists is they don't necessarily have that built-in person when it comes to couples. And not every couple is great about having those conversations, but usually those conversations do tend to happen a little bit more. And, you know, with soloists, we find that oftentimes we need to be that sounding board and that other person to just have that conversation and say, nope, you can do these things. It's okay to want to do these things because they're not really having conversations about that with people who get them and get their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just one big thing where we often step in, and that's how we work with clients is just being that sounding board and encouragement and giving them the permission slip to go do those
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that well, one of the issues is when you have a soloist, and I had someone on the show a couple of years ago, a woman named Carol Marek, who wrote a book on solo aging. So I think that so so when you're the now you're now the adult who does not have children. I guess that does come up like, all right, when I get older, how do I deal with potential caregiving, or support when I'm getting older? So how do you handle that issue?
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack because whether it's mental or emotional support, physical support, or just, just having somebody to talk to. We are working on coming up with a solution right now, and we're hoping to announce it about the end of the year here. But for those in the US, we're partnering with a trust company in order to
Mm,
become, powers of attorneys for people and executors of will, things like that, to be there and be professional sort of help who can
mm-hmm.
step in for those things because we really recognize that there aren't a lot of options for
Right.
people. And yes, you can do your plan, and we work with people all the time of, okay, what is your plan for long-term care? Whether that be you want to be in home and age in place, whether or not you want to move into some sort of retirement facility or a continuing care retirement community, those CCRCs.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that look like? And then, of course, once you have that plan, you need somebody to go ahead and execute that plan, make those decisions for you when you can't, which is why we're doing all this work with the trust company and just really partnering with them to help make that a reality because there aren't a lot of good options. There's the Golden Girls option, which we've seen people do.
Mm,
And that's when a group of friends, they say, okay, we're all going to be each other's power of attorney and executor and we're going to list each other on it. Well, that works really great until everybody but one person dies. So the last person standing, it doesn't work out so well for them anymore because all the people that they did have listed, well, they're gone now and they're unable to make those decisions. Or maybe they're alive, but they can't make decisions for themselves. So they're definitely not going to be able to make decisions for you.
mm-hmm.
So those are just some of the challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and which is why we're trying to create that professional solution to step in and fill that need for
Mm-hmm.
people.
So but the Golden Girl solution is something that you're seeing.
Yeah, definitely seen it, and it's okay to a point, but we always caution clients like, hey, you know, it'll work good until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to think about that too.
Yeah, it needs to be a pretty disciplined approach. It can't be just sort of like, oh, let's live together. I mean, fine,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're in college or afterward. But yeah, it does require. I remember. When I was out of college, I was living with a group of people for about a year, friends. But even then, it was just like, no, no, if this is going to work, it's got to be disciplined, it's got to be organized, it's got to be rules, it's got to figure out how this works. So I think that would
Mhm.
be true going forward too, as well. Um,
Yeah.
any other thoughts? So what are some of the other things? What I think you mentioned me that there were like at least seven distinctive differences for child free planning. What are some of the other differences?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit, and it's part of this main one. But the first one really is you just have full control over your future
Mm-hmm.
because you are making decisions for yourself, and if you're in a couple, you're making decisions together for each other and with each other. But you're not having to make decisions based off of, is there a good school system that we need to live in? Do we need to be here for grandkids? Anything like that. Those considerations don't even pop up with clients,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they're they're so far kind of off the radar for many of our clients that it's not something they're thinking about. I didn't move to where I live now and go, "Oh, what's the school system like?" I didn't even know where the school was here. I just
Mm-hmm.
came here. I always like to tell a story, I've done it, but also many clients is on a Tuesday, I decided I was moving halfway across the country. By Friday, I had an apartment and I went back and packed everything up, and 2 months later, I was moved. And
Wow.
so I didn't know where the grocery store was. I really didn't know where a lot of things were. It was just, I knew I liked what I had looked at, and I
Mm.
was like, okay, I'll figure everything else out.
Wow.
And so that level of flexibility is such a big, big thing for our clients because you're not having to sit there and go, okay, well, if we do move, we need to wait until the end of the school year so they're not moving in the middle of school,
Right.
and we need to look at what the school system is. The amount of times that I'll see posts in different finance groups online of people asking these questions, and I go, I never have to think about those.
Right. Yeah.
So there's, many of that, taking those many retirements, that's also another thing. Um, and just giving those options. But along with that, the second one is that flexibility really needs planning because if you're going to be able to do those things, if you're going to move across the country, decide on a Tuesday and by Friday have a place to move to, y- that can't just happen without having some sort of planning.
Right.
There has to be financial planning behind that. Otherwise, doing that can put you in a really difficult situation. You need to know, hey, these are the things that I need to worry about before I move. These are the things I don't really need to worry about, and I can figure out when I get there. And I can't, in good faith, tell anyone to go make that move without having some sort of financial foundation underneath them
Right.
because that can be really difficult. You know, um, moving is not cheap, as many
Yeah.
people know, and especially when you're doing those things, you're quitting a job. Like there needs to be some sort of thought process and planning because it is much easier to make those tough decisions before something happens
Mm-hmm.
versus when you're in the middle of that something, whatever that sort of crisis looks like. If that's, a big move and you're making these moves, one I guess one big thing that I can tie this into is home buying. So many
Mm-hmm.
of our clients do not buy homes. And in fact, our team, we're renters because we all move so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that really just, that's part of that flexibility needs planning is if you're going to move somewhere and you're not planning to stay there forever, or you're not even planning to stay there for 5 years, it doesn't make sense to buy a house
Mm-hmm.
because you've got closing costs every time, the house maintenance, and then buying and selling. You don't know if you're going to be able to, a lease, you can just break your lease and if you have to, pay a little bit and go and be done. And that's not the same thing when it comes to home buying. So that's such a big thing is just home buying is a choice.
Yeah. That's something that's important because I think that's we don't really look at it very carefully. There's this assumption about you know being American that the American dream is buying a home, and not so much. If you don't really think it through. I mean, certainly if you have kids, yes, all right, that's the decision. Then the schools come in and all that stuff that you mentioned. But reality is that Americans move a lot, and I think you're right. And people talk about, oh, I can't buy a house, I can't, fulfill the American dream. But as you know, if you can't afford a house once you buy it, if you can't maintain the house, you don't have the money to do that. That dream certainly becomes a nightmare because you
Yeah.
really can't support that lifestyle. And also, as you point out, that there's a lot to maintaining a house. Believe me, I know. I'm not. I'm not. I don't regret it, but it's just like, wow, this things can go wrong, and you need to replace them, and you need to deal with it every year. And so it's expensive to maintain a home too. So,
Mhm.
um, and I think that one of the things that people who have kids go through is that the kids grow up and they say, well, what do I do now? So they sell their home and they move, they buy a house where their kids are. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what if the kids get a job somewhere else? What, your kids
Yeah.
will move. So,
Hmm.
yeah, but I think look, I'm not against home buying in any way. But I think it's not the asset that you need necessarily. And I think you point out that it's nothing wrong with leasing, renting. Doesn't I think it no longer says anything about you the way it used to say, well, we were just a renter. These are choices you can make, and these choices have to be tied into your life, not into what you think it's going to be about, your obligations to your kids or to your legacy. Because it's a valuable asset, but it's a heavy asset. And I think it
Yeah.
does get in the way of really doing things that you really want to do if you just feel like you're anchored by this.
Oh, absolutely. If you're anchored down by that, you have all that maintenance to do. There are so many times I've seen clients, they're spending their weekends and their evenings doing all these things for their house that they don't enjoy. And then
Hmm.
they go ahead and sell their house and they're like, oh my gosh, I have a ton of time. I can go do the things I want to do and I can live that life that I wasn't able to do previously because I was so focused on caring for this home that I don't even really like that much. And so it's like, yeah, that's valid. If if somebody's going to be moving around a lot, and you brought up a great point, is parents they have kids grow up and then they go and move and buy a house next to the kids, and the kid gets a new job and moves. It's like probably wasn't the best
Hmm. Hmm.
financial position there. And, you know, when we talk about this with clients, I won't tell somebody that they can never buy a house. I think if you want to buy a house, you need to go into it knowing it's a life decision. It's probably not going to be a financial decision that necessarily pans out unless you're planning on living there
Hmm.
forever. And I can think of two people in my life, like
Hmm.
anyone. And I'm like, yeah, they're putting a house there and they're never moving. But that's
Right.
because there are so many other things that are tied to that, and it's
Right.
particularly farming. Like otherwise, I can't think of anybody else in my life who once they move somewhere, they're not moving again. I'm like, you're gonna be there in a few years and then you're
Hmm.
gonna leave again. So I think so much of that, it's is it really the American dream or is it the old idea of an American dream?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about the financial aspects of it, the planning. And so you guys have this acronym of financial independence, financial independence, live early versus uh, financial independence, retire early. Talk a little bit more about file and how you work with clients.
Yeah, so FILE really came from that financial independence, retire early, the FIRE community. We all hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
And their idea is you work really hard, you just kind of hustle it out for a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
and then you retire and you're never going to work again. Great. We're not seeing that with clients. That's
Yeah.
not something that they want to do or enjoy doing. Instead, they're doing those mini retirements like we chatted about earlier, and that's really what FILE is how can we get you to financial independence so that way you can not only live your life later on, but also now? Because so many times I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I know that I have had many people tell me that, well, I just need to work really hard right now, and then later on I can go live my life and do things. And I mean, part of the reason I got into finance in the first place was because I got so tired of people telling me that I could not do the things I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And I think that's what many of our clients see too, is, just getting exhausted with people saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be just focusing on saving for retirement now. And my answer to that is always, do you pay their bills? No, cool. They have zero vote. Then you're not giving it a vote in somebody else's life there. But this really is File is saying, hey, can we figure out that mini retirement plan for you? Can we figure out how to cut back? For some people, that means switching to a job that they really enjoy.
Hmm.
Maybe it doesn't pay as much. That's okay. And sometimes, I've seen many cases where they've really, really worked hard over a number of years to get their finances in order and build a strong, solid foundation. And then they get to this point where they're continuing to save, but I'm looking at their numbers and I'm going, you don't need to be saving anymore. You can
Hmm.
just cover your expenses and call it good. You don't need to be making that. And so whether that's they cut back on work, they go to, 4 days a week maybe, or they go to part-time, anything like that. And there's somebody who we had who works for beer, bowling, and benefits.
Hmm.
And that's why they work. They enjoy bowling, they enjoy beer, and they just want benefits.
The three
And
B's. Wow, the killer bees.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. You have everything else covered, and it's not a concern for you to keep saving for retirement. So you're just going to work to cover those things, and good. Like, that's fine. That really is what File is about. It's figuring out solutions for each individual person that matches them in their life to get them to enjoy their life now. Oftentimes when we have clients, it get to that point where they don't need to save for retirement anymore or the future. And what we say is, okay, you're going to continue to work, great, but we need you to take and assign that money to something. What are you
Hmm.
going to spend that money that you're making on that's going to bring you joy and help you live the life that you want to live? So sometimes it's travel. We have clients who, you know, they've hit everything they need to do. They don't need to work again, but they really, really care about different charities. So they
Hmm.
work and their money goes to charity and that's it.
Hmm.
And so it is so different based off of each individual person, but it just really, the last two letters, LE, live early. How can we get you to live now?
Yeah, I think that's the anxiety. So how do you deal with their anxiety? Because I know yes, you talk about balancing the spending and the saving, um, but I feel it too. It's so you're always like, well, do I really have enough? What
Mhm.
happens if I run short? How do you deal with basically channeling their anxiety into action?
Yeah. Many times this is natural, so natural.
Hmm.
People, when they initially retire, they tend to spend more,
Right?
and then it's called the retirement smile. Then they spend less, and then towards the end there, they're going to be spending more because it's long-term care costs.
Okay.
But many times, we have clients who I can give them a goal. They need to go spend X amount a month on themselves, and they're not hitting it. Maybe they'll
Hmm.
get close, it'll take a while for them to get close. And it takes a long, long time. We have, clients with six-figure travel goals every year,
Hmm.
just spending six figures every year on travel. And it took them a while to even get there, and they finally got close. And it was funny because I remember that one conversation of, well, the one person said, I think we're there. And the other one's like, well, we're nowhere near that. We can spend more money, but they just don't naturally.
Hmm.
So it really is so person dependent. And it's a long process. It's a long trust process. It's seeing, hey, like, yeah, you spent more than you've ever spent before, but your net worth is still the exact same, if not higher than it has been.
Hmm.
And that happens all the time with clients. So it's really looking at everything holistically and kind of validating that, yes, we understand that it can feel a bit anxiety inducing. Let's look at the numbers. Let's see what that looks like.
Hmm.
I think now more than ever, I'm seeing a ton of people who really just are coming in and saying, whether it be younger people are starting to receive financial gifts from family members
Mm-hmm.
because so many times their financial planners are saying that they're not spending enough money. And so they need to
Mm.
start gifting it now. And that has
Interesting.
been a huge thing. And so if we know that's happening with parents and they're starting to gift to their children, and that can very easily happen to our clients too, is we're doing this exact same thing. We're saying, hey, you're not spending enough money. You're going to end up with a ton at the end. And that's not what you told us that your goal is. What can we give that to now? And one of the big things that we find really will help clients to actually go ahead and spend that money is to take whatever their fun goal is for the year. So whether that's travel or just like renovation projects, anything like that, vehicles, stuff like, the fun stuff, the kind of above and beyond, just things they're doing for joy. And can we match that in giving? So let's say they're giving, they're spending $50,000 a year. And okay, well, now we're going to also give $50,000 a year. That is what tends to get people to actually spend the money
Hmm.
because while they might feel a little anxious about spending the money, they might not actually be feeling anxious about spending it. They're feeling anxious about the idea that they're spending it on themselves.
Hmm.
And so allowing them to give kind of helps them feel like, oh, we're doing something for others, we're helping others. And I can see that impact too.
Hmm. That's great. We'll do this again at the end of the show, but I just want to just take a quick break and just, if people are tuning in, I'm talking with Bri Conn and Child-Free Wealth. So tell people how to get in touch with you. Well, again, I'll tell them at the end of the show too, in case they missed this. But before we get too far, how do people
Yeah.
find out more about you and your firm?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just search Child Free Wealth, you will find us. Our website is childfreewealth.com,
Mm-hmm.
and you can go ahead and book a call with us there. Otherwise, we're all across social media, and we also have a podcast called Child Free Wealth.
Yeah.
So we make it real easy. Everything is Child Free Wealth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you're the co-host of the podcast, is that right?
Yes, I am. So it's Dr. J and myself. We are the two hosts on there together.
Nice,
So.
nice, Dr. J. Nice.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit more about Dr. J.
Yeah. So Dr. J, he's a certified financial planner and he has a adult learning degree in or a PhD in adult learning there. And
Okay.
so he founded Child Free Wealth. Him and his wife don't have children, and he was realized as he was going through the CFP, the Certified Financial Planner curriculum, that everything talks about, what to do if you are empty nester, empty
Mm-hmm.
nest, or if you have kids that are growing up, but there wasn't anything about being single or not having kids or being a couple and not having kids. So he just decided, you know what, this doesn't match, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna go ahead and work on a solution to fix this problem. So that's how Child Free Wealth came about.
Right. Okay. And he has a book, right? And that you can
He
find on the
does.
website. What's the book?
Yes, so the book just released, and that book is called The Child-Free Guide to Life and Money. If you go ahead and read that, it has our eight no baby steps in there. We talk about that's kind of the fundamental of what we do, but that really gives a good outline for a lot of the things that we do. And it's a outline. When we work through it with clients, we dive much deeper than
Mhm.
what can be written in the book too.
Right. Okay, good. Well, so we'll talk about that at the end of the show too, to remind people. Um, I'm just curious about, we talk about different kinds of people without kids. I guess the term is, dinks, right? Dual income, no kids. Sinks, single income, no kids. Any patterns that you see in terms of, are there across genders? Are there more women today who are deciding not to have kids?
So I don't know if it's necessarily like a across the entire
Mm-hmm.
demographic, but I will say that we don't really see single males ever come through our doors. We
Hmm.
see couples all the time, and we see single women all the time.
Hmm.
And in finance in general, that's really strange because typically men are the ones who contact financial planners, kind of lead all the financial stuff. And so ours is just different compared to a lot of people. It's mainly women that we're working with, or if it is a couple, typically it's the wife in the couple or the woman if they're not
Hmm.
married that reaches out to us first. So
Interesting.
it is a little bit different, and I think they are just, really looking to plan and get ahead. I've seen a couple men come through, and they usually have a partner, either a long-term partner or a spouse who just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't present at the meeting. But I can think of, yeah, a couple, literally two
Mm.
people or two men that have come through without a woman in the picture.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah, I would imagine a little bit of a culture thing there about male culture. Like I can do this. I don't need any help in doing this. But it would be helpful, especially
mhm,
if you're um, not having kids, not a natural legacy. Um, I think too. Actually, I think again, I don't have data behind this, but I think women, look, they live longer
mhm,
on average, and I think they think about these things like, well, how do I want to live a life? If I'm living longer and I wanted to sustain, and to live my life, I do think that maybe too. I think a shift, from the traditional female partner taking care of the house and doing all these things and putting off, you know, dreams or travel to later. And I think that's changing a little bit. I don't think in a selfish way, just in a realistic way. Like, wait a minute, there's a long life, and I want to make sure that I don't dump everything at the end. I can
mhm.
live my life, and my family can live the life we want now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think women definitely are thinking about it because they do tend to live longer. And that's one of the things we see all the time is, hey, in couples, so many times when the few times that it's been a couple that's reached out and the husband has reached out first, oftentimes the biggest worry is she going to be okay when I'm gone? Because I've
Mm,
been managing all of this.
right.
And that first step of recognition and having that conversation is so incredibly important because then it's at least being aware.
Mm-hmm.
I have worked through numerous cases in which either one spouse has passed or the spouse has some sort of cognitive decline, and they were the person who handled all the money
Mm-hmm.
and they managed all of it. And now the other spouse is left to kind of figure out what is going on in the background. And that is really, really hard. Not only is it hard for the client, it's hard for kind of like us from a professional standpoint to just figure out what's all going on because there's a lot of things we have to dig through and look through. And it really just kind of breaks your heart a little bit too. And is a little bit is sad
Mm-hmm.
because, this person is going through so much grief and you're there to support them and help them and do what you can, but also recognizing that there are some things that have to be done in a certain timeline when it comes to, closing up probate and all of those things, depending on where they're at taxes. And if they don't know where that is, I was talking to a CPA recently and I just said, this is what I do now. And it's a CPA that I've known for years and just used as my personal CPA.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling them about this, and they said, yeah, the amount of widows or widowers that I've seen in here who don't even know where to find the stuff for their income tax return is incredibly heartbreaking. And you have a limited amount of time to do that after somebody passes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people are starting to understand the impacts of not knowing what's going on with their financial life now. And that's why we're seeing more and more people reach out and bring these concerns up. The best place to start is just to have a conversation with one another, but that can also be tough, especially if you haven't talked about things for a long time before that. You know, um, I've seen couples who've been married for like 20 some odd years and they've really never talked about these things. They've just been living life and going through, but not having those conversations and making sure that both of them are on the same page. That's tricky.
Yeah. I think that, that's an interesting, I don't want to say benefit, but an interesting wrinkle where if you don't have kids, I think it may be more likely to have that conversation earlier, right? Because it's
Hmm.
you and your partner, if you're a dink, um,
Hmm.
and you're not. So I think it is easy when you have kids to basically, sector things like, okay, honey, you do this, I do this, and often, certainly with my parents, it's sort of I don't know if it's traditional, but it was common that, the wife handled like all the domestic budgeting and all that sort of stuff, and then the husband handled the financial big assets and things like that. Whereas, and so yeah, when one passed, it's like, well, where are these things? Where are the documents? Where's this? What are we doing? How do we spend? So I think by being child free, at least that's an interesting opportunity to have these discussions earlier so that you share information, and there's not people aren't in the dark about, where their assets, where their spending is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even it kind of, we work, a lot of financial planners work top down. So they're working with parents and they're working with the kids, the grandkids, all of that. We tend to work more bottom up. So we're working with these kids and their adults
Mm.
in this case, just, kids, and then when their parents. And we're saying, hey, do your parents know what's all going on? Because so
Mm.
many times when our clients are child free, then they're the ones who are just assumed to have the time and flexibility to care for parents, whether or not that's true.
Mm.
And so when they're having conversations with each other, we tell them, hey, go do the same thing with your parents and make sure your parents know what's
Right.
going on. Make sure you know whether or not you're listed on any of their sort of estate planning documents. And if you are, you need to have copies of those things and also know what's going on with them too, because that really impacts your life. You get a call one day that mom broke something and now you have to go and stay with her. Like, I have been on a meeting with somebody in the bathroom of their parents' house just crying because
Mm.
now they're in the middle of this crisis situation. And that is hard. That is
Right.
incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And so having these conversations now and encouraging those conversations between couples also then tends to encourage it between the parents, which can just make overall things better for everyone.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yes, right. Just because you're child free doesn't mean that you don't have parents.
Yeah.
They're not child free. They have you, and they make certain assumptions about you, and so you still have to have a family conversation with your parents, even if you don't have kids. Interesting. That's a good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and one of the things points you've made is obviously that life changes, and it can be changed quickly or not so quickly. But so, how often do you well, how do you set up the basic plan, and then how often do you review it, and what sorts of schedules do you do with your clients?
Yeah, so when we meet with clients, we do an annual service. So, well, the first step in anything is doing a child-free wealth checkup.
Mm-hmm.
In that, you can pay for our time. We send you a bunch of documents. We just give you like a diagnostic overview. You know, when you take your car in
Mm-hmm.
and they rate different things, red, yellow, green, that's what we
Right.
do too.
Oh, okay.
And so that's step one. From there, then there are a couple different paths we put you on. We either put you on the DIY path, which is our academy. We might put you, hourly path, which is, hey, be part of our academy, and then you can buy extra hours with us as you need. And then if you're somebody who has a little more assets, and then that typically comes with a lot more work and needs that more proactive work and a little bit more like tax planning, all those things, then we're going to encourage you to go and become an annual client, which means that you have access to us throughout the year, and we meet with you a little bit more when you need us, a little bit less when you don't. Usually the first year we meet month to month. It really depends. Maybe, hey, something big's
Okay.
going on and you need to meet a little bit more often. We can do that. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm actually doing pretty good. I don't need to. And so there's no one set thing because our clients change so much. It's just, do you need us? Is something happening? Or are you set pretty good and you don't really need us right now? Then there's that too. We have things we're checking on the background. There's constantly things that we're looking at and saying, hey, do we need to do anything, adjust any of this? Um, we'll ask for different things throughout the year just so we can check on it, even if we might not have to have like a full-on conversation about it. But it really just varies. We have our little bit, I guess, busier times as
Mm-hmm.
far as there's a lot more things to review. It's like when it's coming to tax time,
Okay.
um, open enrollment, that tends to be a little bit busier. Um, but it's really so dependent on the client and how often we meet. Because there are some clients where we meet a little bit more often for a period of time, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're like, I'm good, we'll see you in 2 months. So
Okay. All right.
it works. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the academy. Tell me, what is that about? The academy.
Yeah, so the academy really is for anybody who is just getting their financial foundation started, and
Mm-hmm.
it really doesn't have that in place. They're just starting out. Maybe they're just really focusing on trying to pay off debt or just get an emergency fund built initially. That's where they're at. They're not to the parts of focusing on investing or doing a little bit more tax things or anything like that. So it's a course, well, it's a couple courses. Has a bunch of different videos, articles, podcasts in there that we've done. And then there's also Q&As. So you can come, you can show up, come to our group Q&A, ask questions as you need, and kind of get those questions answered. You have
Mm-hmm.
access to Right Capital, which is our financial planning software system, but it's really for people who are looking to DIY things and can do most of it on their own. They don't need a ton of support, or they're just at those beginning stages.
Interesting. So you have a couple different options. You can do a
Hmm.
DIY, you can do a partial, you can do a full consultation. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that offering a hybrid approach, I think, is what people need to sort of figure out what they need. As opposed to this is what we do, take it or leave
Yeah.
it. you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it we really do go through as we review things, and then every time I meet with somebody for a checkup call, I'm looking and seeing, okay, what is going to best fit them because not everybody needs our annual service. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we recommend the annual service, it's because we believe you actually need it for a variety of reasons, I can get emails from people and it happens frequently of they're like, "Oh, well, I just need this or this." I'm like, "Okay, yes, you think you just need that. You are missing a ton of other questions in there, though. Like, there are a lot of questions that need to be asked before we can even get to that. So,
Mm-hmm.
what you really need is you need more one-on-one help and service and focus for this because there's a lot going on there and it's not just one thing.
Right. Right. Now, so a lot of what you deal with in your clients is sort of balancing their work and career with their life. What about you personally? How do you balance your career and your life?
That's a good question. Nobody's asked me that. Um, so I just love being active and being outdoors,
Mm-hmm.
and I love to run. That's a big thing. I like weightlifting. I love swimming. So I'm a very, very active person, and I tend to do a ton of those things. That's kind of my way to stay sane.
Mm-hmm.
I like to read a lot, and so I am usually either being active in some way or reading when I'm not
Mm-hmm.
working. And so tends to be what I do and
Yeah.
how I balance my things.
Well, it's good that you have those because if you're like me, then it's a lot of it is sitting work. So
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
that's not good for your health, as
Yeah.
we've discovered. And
Yeah.
interesting, as we progress through technology and through our economy, there's a notion that going from physical manual labor to office work was like, oh, this is good. This, white collar work, it's just like, yeah, but sitting is not really good. We're designed for movement, activity, so that's great. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And let me just ask you, as you've gotten into this work, have there been any surprises, any things you've learned along the way that you didn't expect to learn? Because you had, interesting background in marketing and communications, which I'm sure came in handy for this kind of work itself. But
Yeah.
anything that you've learned along the way that you really didn't expect or you found pleasantly surprised?
I think the variety of different things people want to do is the most surprising thing to me because
Hmm.
I grew up where everything is one way, everybody does it the same, there's not a whole lot of variety. And now my worldview was definitely expanding before that. I've been lots of places, enjoyed lots of different things, but seeing the lives that so many people are living and in different ways has really expanded the ideas of, okay, what do I want to do too? Like, do
Mm-hmm.
I want to make some more shifts? What does that look like? So that is the most surprising thing to me, just the continual ideas I get of different things I can do with my life.
Mm. That's great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. And it's sort of a prompter like, didn't think of that before.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that you'll keep doing this along the way, or do you think you may have another career?
I mean, I have a long life. Who knows?
Right.
I plan to do this for the foreseeable future. I don't. I don't know that I could really step away from financial planning at
Mm-hmm.
all just because I truly enjoy what I do all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And I have a very hard time envisioning that I won't be involved in financial planning in some way for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, of course, it could take many different, iterations of financial planning. So,
Mhm.
just like for me as a writer, well, lots of different ways. As a journalist, as an independent writer, as a blogger, as a, podcaster, I consider this still part of my writing career. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So listen, I think we've come to the end of the show. I just wanted to mention once again, for our audience, Bree, tell them they can reach you and Child Free Wealth.
Yeah, if you just search Child Free Wealth, you will find our website. It's Child Free Wealth. We have a podcast, Child Free Wealth, and on social, Child Free Wealth. So nice and easy.
Right. And yes, you're on LinkedIn, I see.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I mentioned again that you have a podcast, Child Free Wealth Podcast. So just Google Child Free Wealth and they'll find you.
Yep, we will pop up right there on the top.
Right. Great. Okay.
Awesome.
So, folks, if you have any questions or comments, want to contact me for more information, you can reach me at ron.roel at gmail.com. My website is roelresources.com, and you can find my shows on that site as well. Just go to the site and click on 45 Forward. So again, folks, tell them if they missed my conversation, you can find it on the Voice America Libsyn website, as well as Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio platforms. There's a new platform too on YouTube, Voice America YouTube. So you can find our live stream there. So, folks, once again, be sure to join me next week. I'll be talking with Bri Conn. She's a nationally recognized psychotherapist, also a sex therapist, author, and columnist, and radio host. And she will describe her unique array of advice and treatments for relationship issues and sexual issues at all stages of life. So, until then, folks, keep moving forward, 45 forward.